One of the best and worst things about woodworking is options.
Take something as simple as joining two boards together. Ask 10 woodworkers and you'll get 100 different ways to do it. And just as many opinions on which one is the right way. This is called a butt joint, and it's the best way to join two boards together.
See what I mean about opinions?
Today we're breaking down some of the best butt joints out there, when to use them, and how strong they really are.
Which means we're gonna break some stuff for educational purposes. The point of butt joints is to be easy. They're not the strongest, but in the right application, they'll get the job done. When choosing a joinery method, there's 3 key things to consider.
Wood orientation, end grain, face grain, edge grain. If you don't learn the difference, your joints are already in trouble. Tools you have versus tools you need. Sometimes you work with what you've got. Sometimes you got to invest. Your project. There's no one size fits all. It's about your vision and your ability to bring it to life.
To quote Ecclesiastics, everything has a time and a place.
And that includes just glue and wood.
Wood is stronger than glue, right? Yes, but also, no.
The glue itself is stronger than lignin. That's the fancy name for the stuff holding wood fibers together. This is why it's easier to split a board along the grain than it is to chop it in half across the grain. So wood glue is stronger than wood from a certain point of view, but only when it's used correctly, and that means taking wood orientation into account.
You might think this isn't a strong enough joint. And you're right.
End grain sucks up glue like a sponge, which makes for a weak joint. This is why wood joinery is so important. It can literally make or break your project, as well as your heart.
If the joint is end grain to face grain or end grain to edge grain, it's gonna make for a weaker joint. Maybe. Apparently it's a lot stronger than I thought it would be. We're gonna try something. That didn't work. Let's try something else. The end grain to edge grain really surprised me, but I think that was because I couldn't get proper leverage on such a small board. Let's try this bigger one. For smaller butt joints, some type of reinforcement is gonna be needed. Nails can work. There's more to a build than just one fastener and one joint. Take a house, for example.
In the US, most homes are built using a lot of butt joints and nails, but that alone isn't strong enough to stop the wind from pushing it over. That's where sheathing comes in, adding an extra layer of strength and stability. Adding a bottom to a box or back panel to a cabinet will help to strengthen any butt joint. And yes, pre-drilling is a good idea, even for nails. Your drill bit should be slightly smaller than the fastener's shank. This helps prevent splitting, especially near the edge of a board, and is great when precise placement is crucial. Nails are totally fine for something like a picture frame, a small box, or a small tray.
Overall, I don't think this is going to be much stronger than the first joint. I was right.
Maybe you're not a fan of metal.
Then dowels might just be your style. They're like the poor man's loose tenon joinery. Hey, back off. I'm not ready to talk about you yet.
Some people glue the butt joint first, let it dry, and then drill holes for the dowels. It does work, but I'm not a fan, as you risk disturbing the glue bond. But that's not the only risk with dowels. Overgluing and trapped air can split the wood, and no amount of hand pressure is going to save you. Before you go drilling out your third attempt, make sure you're using the right bit. A brad point bit will give you the best results. To achieve the cleanest cut, you'll want to start slow. Rushing this can cause tear out, especially on the face grain. Marking lines on the wood helps keep your drill as straight as possible when freehanding. A drill press would take it to the next level.
Or you can just eyeball it, not mark anything out, and look like a complete mess. Completely up to you.
I now understand why people make their own dowels. I spent way too long just getting these to the proper thickness. It could be worse. You could buy dowels from Amazon that are too thin. With solid dowels, you want to leave a little extra room in the hole for trapped air and excess glue. In general, the dowel should be about half the thickness of the wood being joined.
This method pretty much works for any butt joint, which, let's be honest, usually means some type of box. Okay, let's see if I can break this one by hand. I think the failure is gonna be around these dowels. Let's see. Oh, almost. I don't know why I said I gained some appreciation for dowel joinery while doing this. But if I'm gonna be honest here, if I'm gonna spend my time doing something, I'm not gonna be doing this. I think you're better off just using screws.
Before you start, you need the right screw. Full threaded or partially threaded? That's the big question. A fully threaded screw holds boards together, but the pulling force is weak with this one. But a partially threaded screw acts like a built-in clamp, pulling the boards together. It all comes down to 3 key parts: the head, the threads, and the shank. Before you pre-drill, you need to countersink or bore out some material. This will let the shank sit in the top board properly, pulling everything together, and it gives us some options for filling the hole later. Just like with dowels, always pre-drill before adding glue. Why? Because glue makes boards slippery. Now, you could just leave the screw holes exposed, especially if they're in spots no one will see, or if it's just for your shop.
But if you want them to look good, fill them. And here's 4 ways that you can do that.
Use a dowel of the same material or a contrasting wood to fill the hole. Not a fan of end grain showing? You can either try to match the wood for a seamless look, or again, go for contrast. You'll need a plug cutter to do this, but here's the catch. You need a drill press for this, which I do not have.
So, I'm about to do something mildly sketchy.
I do have a portable drill guide. It's basically a drill press, except I can only drill halfway through. To really up the sketch factor, I had to finish the plugs with just a hand drill. It only took me 6 tries to get the 4 plugs I needed. Would I recommend this method? Not unless you enjoy unnecessary frustration, but hey, sometimes you just work with what you've got. If you don't have a drill press, just buy the plugs. Matching the face grain to hide the hole, that's an art form.
Maybe you're a little hip to it like me, and you won't put a little color in it. Dance buddy.
With a little help from mica powder, baking soda, and thin super glue, you can create a colorful, rock-hard filler. Thin super glue is the key. Not thick, not medium. Thin. You'll see why that is important in a moment. I did use a spray accelerator because I over-applied the CA glue and because it looks cool, but you don't need to. That smoke? It's an exothermic reaction, which means it's curing fast and heating up. Gloves and ventilation are a must. Because the glue cures so fast, you need to apply the powder in layers to avoid this. This is one of those things you need to test out before using it on your project. Depending on the depth of the hole, you might want to fill it with a dowel first before adding the powder. The fumes can also irritate your eyes, so be safe. If fumes are a no-go, epoxy might be your best bet to add color. Regular epoxy cures way too slowly for this method. This is where UV resin comes in. Low odors and low VOCs are common claims for UV resins. However, a well-ventilated area is your friend. If you've never used this stuff before, know that you'll need a UV light source to cure the resin. Hence the name UV resin. Curing time depends on 2 things: the power of your UV light and the depth of the hole. Like the mica powder and baking soda mixture, you need to do this in layers. When testing the epoxy, I noticed the colors often bleed, so to avoid this, I pre-sealed the holes. Now, there are pre-colored versions of UV resins, but I like to make things complicated and mix my own. If you use alcohol ink, you need the hole to be deeper to get a darker color. whereas mica powder requires less depth to achieve the color you want. For both, a little colorant goes a long way, so make sure to do some practice runs to work out any kinks in your process before applying the resin. I cured each layer for about 1 minute, so this can be slightly tedious.
Okay, I'm doubting myself a little bit on this one, but if the dowels taught me anything, the wood is going to give out right around the screws. Bingo! Ooh, the screws broke. Poplar broke pretty easily. That was close. This is pine, not even a challenge. Never doubted myself, even for a second. Maybe you're not the flashy type. Maybe you're more a daring duck of mystery.
Let's get dangerous.
Then a hidden butt joint might be more your style. And you could use a Festo domino. But that right there is a bunch of malarkey. What? No, malarkey.
I get it. It seems like every real woodworker has one, but unless woodworking is your profession or you're in a time crunch, dropping over $1,000 on one of these is just, well, an expensive flex.
Never leave the cave without it.
It isn't worth it.
If I had bought one, I would have used it 4 times in the last 2 years.
If money is the biggest factor, because come on, it is, I highly recommend getting a doweling jig for your hidden joinery needs.
There are plenty of options here, from cheap but versatile to still relatively cheap but better quality. I find the Rockler doweling jig to be a great entry-level option. It even comes with a drill bit, but there's a catch. The jig is locked in one depth position and only does one dowel size. The good? It has this handy little tab for quick alignment on smaller projects. Figuring out the best way to clamp this thing down can be a little frustrating at times. Technically, you don't need a doweling jig. You could use dowel center pins and a drill press, a drilling guide with some dowel center pins, or just eyeball it. I don't recommend that last one, but to each their own. But what you will want to use for any hidden dowels is a fluted dowel. The grooves create channels for air to escape, and excess glue to squeeze out. For end grain to edge grain joints, clamping the jig is way less of a Rubik's Cube. Keep in mind that the bigger the board, the more or larger dowels you'll need. It's one thing to line up 2 dowel holes, it's another thing to line up 2 lines of 4 perfectly parallel holes. Basically, the more dowel holes you need, the more accuracy is needed. Any small error increases with each additional hole. Normally, the only answer to this problem is to buy a higher quality tool, which is a fancy way of saying more expensive. You can also use the doweling jig to help with alignment during a panel glue up. But if you want to drill in the center of a board, you'll need a self-centering jig.
Okay, I think I'm talking myself into a domino now.
That's right, never mind.
If history has taught us anything, this joint will break pretty easily. Like I said, this one on the other hand, this ain't happening. Ain't breaking. Nothing.
For a simple box or shaker style door, a simple doweling jig will work, but as your project gets more complicated, a tool with more options is preferred.
When talking about hidden butt joints, saying pocket holes is a bit of an oxymoron.
One of the biggest mistakes people make with pocket holes is their orientation. You might think placing the pocket holes on the inside of the joint hides them, but congrats, you just made a weak joint. Why? Because the screw is now in very little material, which means it's pretty much guaranteed to fail. When designing your build with pocket holes, you need to think about the screw angle, where the holes will be visible, and how you'll cover them. Another mistake people make is screwing into the end grain. I can't think of a single reason you'd ever want to screw into end grain, unless you want your joint to fail. Clamping as close to the pocket hole as possible when driving screws will save you some heartache. The pocket hole angle naturally wants to shift the board ever so slightly. One more pocket hole rule for the road. You don't want to attach a board with the grain running east to west with one running north to south. Wood movement is just waiting to mess you up. But with this rule, there is an exception. Example, a face frame for a cabinet. To minimize problems in the future, keep these boards no wider than 3 inches.
When done correctly, a pocket hole is a strong joint. I mean, this is going to be easy to break, but you wouldn't use it like this. Outside of me just breaking this for fun, the screws act as a clamp and allow you to get right back to work. This is a good joint. Don't let this stupid test say otherwise. Miter butts. No. That's a video for another time. No matter what Google says, I do not consider those butt joints, as they're a lot harder to do than just gluing 2 ends of a board together. What opinions do you have? What did I get wrong? Because I definitely probably got something wrong. Let me know in the comments below. I'm Joseph with 5 Doug Studio. I hope to see you next time. Wouldn't be the same without you.